Do we have any apologies? Yes, we have Jonathan Gilletley, Councillor Jonathan Gilletley. Any declarations of interest for this meeting? Oh, sorry. For apologies, can I have a mover and a second? Councillor Gray, Councillor O'Connor. Declarations of interest, please.
Mr Mayor, Councillors, I have two declarations with regards to agenda item 19.2, provision of HR training and workplace health and safety services. I'm a managing director of a company named in the report, and on that basis I will leave the meeting when this agenda item is being discussed. I've also can confirm that I've had no part in preparing the report on this matter to this meeting, and that I have delegated all authority for decisions relating to the company's Blackadder Associates and Premier Management Consulting to Council's group leaders on the 24th of March 2018. And my second declaration is with regards to agenda item 11.1, modification to DA 198/2016/A. A consultant working for the Armidale School was an employee when I was the CEO at Toowoomba City Council between 2004 and 2006. And on that basis, when this agenda item is discussed, I will also leave the room.
Thank you, Mr CEO. Move on to have your say, item 5, and we have 3 people wishing to speak. I'd like to call up Dr. Herman Bayersdorf, please, and you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr Mayor and Councillors, for giving me the time. I know you have very many important items on the agenda. I do hope you'll be able to sort of seriously consider this particular report and any action that might flow from it. Look, in 2016, I think it was June or July of 2016, the then administrator removed, without consultation I might say, all the portraits of Armidale City, which were on the right as he ended, or old black and white ones, Dumeric Shire on the left past the door, and also, of course, Armidale Dumeric Council. And they're in storage, I know not where. Look, I'm here not to talk about the past, and that's happened. I'm here to try to urge councillors to perhaps consider putting them back where they were, or at least in a similar place where they can be looked at. Now, in the report, and I grant it's only an interim report, it does say that, what does it say? Yes, that they were replaced by works of art. Now, that's fine. I've got no problems with that. They're quite nice works of art, but it shouldn't be an either or. You keep your mayoral portraits in a suitable place and works of art elsewhere. The other thing, and I do think that is an error, or at least it's not obvious to me, it says in the report that the council was running out of space on the walls. Well, quite frankly, that is not the case as far as I can determine. Because I've been hanging there for 20 or 30 years, without being in the road. And really, if they're reinstated, there was still, from memory anyway, still at least half a wall left. And by the way, that half wall would just hopefully also cover the future, i.e. The current and future mayors, and I would also urge strongly the administrator of the Armidale Regional Council. Having them digitalised is a great addition and something I welcome, as well as having the walls painted, but it's no replacement for actually having those 80 photos going right back to 1863. That's 155 years of local government history that's sort of gathering dust in some storage room. Really, fellow councillors, my first preference, is only giving you a personal opinion, would be to put them back where they were. I think that was quite good to have and enough space, because at the moment that left wall is entirely blank and has been for 1 or 2 years. That would be my first preference, but if council wants to look at other options through reports from the GM or CEO, well, other options be considered. It could be the town hall, it could be some of them upstairs, but let it be a suitable and a dignified place. And let's not leave these portraits of great historical importance, of local government historical importance, bring them back to their rightful place, beginning with Allingham, 1863, and certainly for the moment anyway, and I know new ones will come, ending with Bayersdorf 2015-16. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Basil. The second speaker is Darshan Wood, please.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I've come here today just to speak my opinion about the proposed rail trail. I've come here just to speak as the common man, just speaking from a point of common sense, I guess. But seeing as how it's the day after Anzac Day, we've all had a day to sort of reflect on this land, what our forebearers have done before us to basically ensure our freedoms, our rights. We all know about the horror stories that many endured, and I thought it'd be relevant today to start off with what is the foundation law, the overarching law of this land, which is the Constitution Act of Australia. Now, a lot of people will argue that it's outdated, that I've even had state politicians actually tell me that it's of no significance, but considering that our federal member, Barnaby Joyce, was taken to the High Court, or the Court of Disputed Returns, regarding the Constitution, I don't think anyone can really argue that it is the overarching law of this land and everything has to adhere to that Constitution. It is sort of a little bit forgotten, but I'd just like to read the preamble, because in 1900 that was essentially a gift from a dying queen to the people of this land. It was a new hope. It was kind of the apex of humanity in a way. So I'd just like to read the preamble, which is, whereas the people of New South Wales, Victoria, South Australia, Queensland and Tasmania, humbly relying on the blessing of Almighty God, have agreed to unite in one indissoluble federal commonwealth under the Crown of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland, and under the Constitution hereby established. And whereas it is expedient to provide for the admission into the Commonwealth of other Australasian colonies and possessions of the Queen, we have our most excellent Majesty the Queen depicted on the wall here. It's very good to see. Be it therefore enacted by the Queen's most excellent Majesty, by and with the advice and consent of the Lord Spiritual and Temporal and Commons, in this present Parliament assembled, and by the authority of the same as follows. And then we have the opening clauses, first the covering clauses, and then the 9th clause being the Constitution itself. Just a couple of points. Whereas the people. Whereas the people. Not whereas Turnbull government, not whereas NSW government, not as anything else. It's whereas the people. Humbly relying on the blessing of Almighty God. Now, this was just to state that we're just mere mortal men, and we are always looking for higher authority, for higher guidance. As the maxim of law says, the law, like nature, always aspires to perfection. And this document, this powerful document, is as close as what the good, honest men and women of this land put forward under the blessing of Almighty God to be a form of perfection. So the day after Anzac Day, we've got to acknowledge that the diggers, that's what they were fighting for. They were fighting for that protection under the Crown. Now, we have a day to pay homage to that, and we've got to recognise that we have a duty to uphold this document, to protect it, and so that's what those men went off and fought for. That's what they went off and died for, because if the Crown failed, if the Crown was dissolved, that document, which was only enacted 14 years before...
Adashan, you only allowed 5 minutes and
Okay.
your time, sorry.
No, you're right. So
Your time, sorry. That time's up. No, it's a 5 minute... There are 5 minutes given to every speaker, and that was advised right from the start, so, sorry.
No, I'll thank you,
Thank
ladies and gentlemen. Sorry.
Thank you, Councillor O'Connor. Mr Rod Tabor, please.
Yeah, I'm sorry if I'm a bit out of breath. I was running. I thought the meeting was 2 o'clock, so I've been running. So excuse me if I sound a bit out of breath. And I speak on behalf of the Armidale Regional Ratepayers Association and Save the Great Northern Railway Group. Our issue is the closure of the rail corridor north of Armidale. The proposal put forward by NERT to establish a rail corridor, and we believe is secondary. We believe the future of passenger rail north of Armidale should be considered. Sorry, okay. Let me do that. Okay. And with the ageing population, it has become quite apparent that rail transport has been accepted more and more, particularly towns such as Glennis and Tenterfield, who are seeing an increase in retirees moving to the area. Now, these people need to be considered. We intend to hold a meeting in Tenterfield. We've already been in discussion with Tenterfield Council to gauge the support in Tenterfield, and we believe they are not in support of a rail trail. All the surveys I've seen support a passenger rail north from Armidale. The Department of Premier and Cabinet report showed that there was no support, and the polls clearly showed that. The Armidale Express are currently running a survey, and 80% for passenger rail. The possibility of a tourist train could be and could be a great opportunity. Excuse me. My wife and I have just got back from New Zealand and checked out a tourist train in New Zealand, and it's proved to be very, very successful. The steam train from Wallingarra to Warwick is booked out 12 months ahead. We are very much against spending money on a business case. We know the community are against the rail trail. Thank you. Okay, what's up there? I'll start that again. We're very much spending money on a business case, and we know the community are against the rail trail and support a passenger train. Freight is also an issue. We know it takes a third of the fuel to move a tonne of freight by rail than by road. And when we see fuel at $2.50 a litre, which I believe is going to be reasonably soon, and probably in the next couple of years, you will find that we'll need to put freight back on rail. So freight, and we believe, is a major issue. And already in New Zealand, again, we saw fuel there at $2.50 a litre in some places, so it's not far off. So our group, we ask you to consider your options before proceeding with this rail trail proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Rod. Okay, we move on to, before we start, no, sorry. No, there is no item that is, please. Now, what I would like to do is to publicly thank Councillor Bailey for attending the Dangersley Anzac ceremony, Councillor Gray for attending the Gyra ceremony. Thank you very much for doing those two. I was at Tinga, so it was a terrific ceremonies all around the region. I believe Councillor Murat would like to just have a little input here.
Yes, I've been asked by the President of the RSL in Armidale to thank the Council, in particular Council's outdoor staff, for the tremendous job they've done in preparing Civic Park for the ceremony. He said he got the ceremony at 3:30 in the morning and the Council staff had it pretty well set up, and he was very impressed with what they'd done and the service they'd given. So he wanted to pass that along to Council staff, and I request that management do that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Murat. Okay, confirmation of minutes. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Okay, the confirmation of the minutes that you've moved, Councillor Martin, Councillor Witters. Is there any corrections to the minutes? Issues to the minutes? If not, I'll put that. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Now, you have a late item, which is item 7, which we would like to cover now, which is the mayoral minute, item L1, and there's 4 recommendations in there. Can I have a mover for that, please? Councillor Murat? Oh, sorry. Yes, oh, sorry, I'll move on the second. Councillor Murat. How's that? Thank you, Councillor Tyler. I just got into routine here. So, this is just a further on from the Flying Foxes. I'd ask the CEO if there's any issues to convey to you. Thank you.
Mr Mayor, councillors, just a very high-level summary. Back towards the end of last year, the city experienced a significant influx of flying foxes in the Black Gully area. Based on advice from the Office of Environment and Health, we engaged a consultant to prepare a camp management plan. In January, we were successful in gaining funding for that plan. We have received the plan back from the consultant at the end of March, and we're asking you to endorse that plan for public exhibition, which is we're required to do. And we're waiting on comment back from the Office of Environment and Health, which we expect any day. We have our program leader, Parks and Facilities, here, so if councillors require any more information, Richard would be happy to provide answers.
Heritage, I presume, right? Heritage, I presume. Okay. Anyone wish to speak for or against? Councillor O'Connor?
I have a question.
Councillor Tiley, sorry.
Does the camp management plan, Mr Interim CEO, go to the matter of dispersal, or is it just what it says? I come from the home of bats, as you probably know. I'd trade you your 1,000 for our 100,000 any day. And we've been talking about this down there for 20 years, but unless you've got a dispersal plan, and we're just getting to that stage on the Clarence, you know, you're beating your head against a brick wall. So I asked the question about dispersal.
Councillor O'Connor, can you turn your mic off, please?
Mr Mayor, do you mind if I ask our program leader to respond to the question?
Councillor O'Connor, will you turn your mic off, please?
That bats live for 15 years. They breed between September and April. They come back next year to where they were bred to breed themselves. And it's about breaking that cycle, and it's exceedingly difficult. If we knock down some of the habitat where they are now, I know it's going to happen. You're just going to find another nice nest of trees elsewhere in the city. So there's a need for a long-term dispersal plan, and we should be turning our minds to that sooner rather than later. Thank you.
Now, Councillor O'Connor.
Yes, I'd like to make a couple of comments about this. Several weeks ago, I asked for a copy of the draft plan and was told that it wouldn't be available till the state government got back to council on the draft. Now, the procedure now, as everybody here can see, is that we've just had a mere minute with almost no notice to us given, and some form of the draft report delivered well outside the statutory time requirement for councillors, so we've not had adequate time to consider this. I have made numerous visits up to the disturbed residents involved in this bat colony this year. I absolutely support what Councillor Tiley has said. I've also spoken to Adam Marshall, about our local member, about this matter. It is clearly a state government matter. I'm very disturbed at two things. One, the process, whereby we really haven't been given enough time to properly consider this. Two, the fact that, as Councillor Tiley has mentioned, there isn't a proper dispersal aspect to the draft. And thirdly, I really don't think that our residents who are extremely affected by this, have been given proper weight. Their views have been given proper weight in the draft as it currently stands. I have no objection to this draft going on public exhibition. However, I will not be able to endorse it, and I will certainly be asking that the motion or the minute be put up in seriatim, so that I have the freedom to express my views as per the separate items in the motion. I'm really concerned that this has been a problem that we've known about ever since October last year, and with great respect to Councillor Tyler, it's not 1,000, it was up to 30,000, and right over a prime residential area, to the great distress of our residents, and I think we just need to do better all round on this.
Any other councillors? Councillor Withers?
Excuse my ignorance here. With this draft policy, if it's in what's proposed now, if it then goes to public display, are the public then able to comment on the final thing, so that the draft policy or the draft management plan will then be adjusted with the public's comments and public's concerns put into it?
Mr. CEO, if you could just clarify that, please.
Certainly, yes, Councillor Witters. The process will be, we will place the document on public exhibition, invite submissions. Those submissions will be reported back to Council to consider prior to adoption of the final plan, and that report will also contain feedback we received from the Office of Environment and Health.
So again, so that, how I just had the question. So that will allow,
I'm just trying. I had the question. I forgot it. Never mind. I'll come back to it because I forgot what I was going to ask. But I did have a question for you.
So basically, it's going to it's down here, item D, that if there's no submissions, but if there are going to be submissions, if people want to change the plan or put comments in it, as our CEO said, it will come back to the council to get the plan changed, so and then come back to council. So there are a couple of processes. Any other councillors? No, I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour?
Excuse me, Mr Mayor, I did make a request that the items be put in seriatim.
Councillor, are you moving that?
Yes.
So we're second it? Councillor Robinson. Okay, we'll deal with them in seriatim then. Sorry? Oh, no. No, not yet. That's right, I'm just about to. Councillor Robinson, can you turn your mic's on again? So we've got a request, a motion that we do it in seriatim. Those in favour? Those against? Motion's lost. So we'll go back to the original motion. Those in favour? Those against? Carried.
I have my dissent recorded, thank you.
So item 8.1, which is the public display of former mayoral portraits. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor O'Brien, I think. Councillor O'Brien, Councillor O'Connor. Councillor O'Brien.
Mr Mayor, I have a question of Councillor O'Brien, of Councillor O'Connor. Can I ask a question before she talks?
Yes, you may.
Obviously, the motion was prepared before the interim CEO report was added on. Are you not happy with the interim CEO's report?
No, I'm not satisfied. I would like a more this is noted as an interim report. I would like a more detailed report.
So, Councillor O'Brien.
Okay, are we talking to the motion of having them? Okay, what I wanted to. Oh, yep, okay, all right, I agree with having a report. I also agree that it would be a fantastic idea to examine it because it's a fantastic educational resource for the community, and I've heard a lot of people say that they want to know what's going on, so yeah.
So just to clarify, it is on the web and it's a more detailed information on the web for each individual person. If you go and have a look on the web there, it's because at the moment a portrait is just the person in their period. The information is on the web actually details a bit of information about that individual. So do you need more?
Are you talking? Are you arguing for them not being on the wall? Because I'm not sure what's going on here.
I'm just clarifying. You mentioned about the information, so that's why I was just clarifying.
Okay. No, well, people are wanting information about why they've been taken down, and people would love to see them back up. I know I had a call from somebody whose grandfather or great-grandfather was Mayor Curtis, whom the Curtis Park was named after, and he was very, disappointed that that history is not available for school children, for people to see their history, to be able to look at the names of the former mayors, and also just for children to see the past. I'd like to see little girls to see a room full of blokes' heads too, so they can make a decision that the world's got to change. So I think it's a real great historical resource for school children. I'd like to see some, further investigation and maybe put them back up.
Councillor O'Connor.
Oh, thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, I've suggested that this matter go forward as an item. It's just for a more complete report on where we're up to. I know that the paragraph that's been submitted as a report is basically a copy of something that's already been up on the web, and it's entitled now an interim report. It's lifted, I think, from the response Simon Says or something like that. Look, I think this is a very serious matter. A number of people in the community have approached me really concerned about the loss of Armidale region's heritage and the loss of these portraits. Now, I do recall that there was a need to spruce up the vestibule of the CAB during the merger period, and I didn't have any concern about that. But my very strong and clear recollection is that when the administrator, with great respect, undertook to renovate that front area, he did so at his own initiative, as he was absolutely entitled. But he did indicate to members of the LRAC, which was the local Representative Advisory Committee at the time, of which I was a member, that those portraits would come down but would be reinstated somewhere in the CAB where the public could see them. That was a personal undertaking, as I recollect. And I'm not wishing to pick a fight with anybody outside or inside this room. It was just my personal recollection. All I'm asking is that the community voice on this have an opportunity to be articulated in the next 1 or 2 months. Now, I believe that it's absolutely unheard of, and indeed it's unheard of in Guyra, that the mayoral portraits would be taken down and not replaced in the council chambers. They are there. I believe there was a suggestion that those portraits might be reinstated in this place, in this room. So we are a new council. We're moving forward on lots of fronts, but this is one that is a heritage and personal concern for many, many members of the former Armidale-Dumaric local government area, and indeed the former Armidale City local government area. And I think we go forward successfully if we pay respect to the past, and that's really all those constituents, those members of our community want to happen. And I think it would be a really excellent part of the tidying up of the merger projects that a proper report is brought. That's all this is about. I'm not saying what the outcome should be. I'm not denigrating the excellent work that's been done on making them available online, but I don't think that it can be said that of all the ubiquitous things that are now online by government, putting those heritage photographs online is a satisfactory response to the concerns of this community. So I'm asking councillors to please keep an open mind, vote to support a further and more complete report, and indeed perhaps some kind of survey or is community engagement process be undertaken before, so that this niggling issue with Armidale residents can be resolved in a fair way. Thank you.
Councillor O'Connor, any other councillor wish to speak for the motion? Councillor Bailey.
Mr Mayor, I support that we should put the portraits back up, and I think if we don't put the portraits back up, I think to be fair and equitable to all concerned, we should remove the portraits from the Guyra Council, because it would be hypocritical to have them in Guyra and not in Armidale. I think in terms of fairness and equity, we should have the portraits up. If we choose not to have the portraits up, they should come down from both Guyra and Armidale and then go online. But my preferred option is put them up, and when we get to the stage where we need some more room, well, we can make some shuffling.
Anyone wants to speak against the motion? Okay, I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. So item 9.1, which is 2 parts, and it's based on the council meeting cycle for ordinary meetings 2018-2019. So could I have a mover, please?
I don't.
Oh, yes, I will. I'd also request a move that Wednesday the 28th of November, cross out the Armidale and replace with a Tinga. So with that in mind, do I have a mover, please? Councillor Gray.
Yeah.
Councillor Murat. Councillor Robertson, you've got to turn your mic on, please.
If we could have a procedural motion to discuss the rail trail first, rather than having all the community waiting, since they're interested in that issue. If I can get a seconder for that.
Councillor Robinson, how do we deal with this one? And I'll consider it after that. So it was Councillor Gray, Councillor Murat. Councillor Gray?
I don't wish to say anything at this point in time, but will reserve my right of reply if need be.
Councillor Murat? Councillor Bryan, you wish to speak forward?
No.
Then you get your mic on. Councillor Witters wish to speak forward?
I'll speak for a motion of this to go along with this. We'll say it's for this motion that you put up. I have written in my notes to ask if there was a meeting planned for a smaller centre. I do notice that you've put Tingha, but there are other smaller centres within the region that may want to host a council meeting at some point to recognise that they are part of the region as well.
Thank you, Councillor Witters. The difficulty is even Tingha trying to get facilities out there. That's a problem about going to a much smaller area. I appreciate the thought. We're just hoping with our consultation out in those smaller communities from now on. So, Councillor O'Brien wishes to speak against?
Yes, I want to speak against it. My concern is that council should be really looking at being inclusive and representative. And I think that if we wanted to attract more community representation and leaders from right across the community, that I think we are not being truly representative as long as we're having meetings during the day. I think most people during the day are at work. I think if we're going to have proper diversity, we have to have diverse representation. So having a council meeting in the day actually excludes workers. Like me, for example, I have to take unpaid leave to come to a council meeting, or have to take holiday. But it does give a signal to those people in the community to say childcare workers, teachers, builders, all kinds of representation right across the community. Plumbers, did you say? Farmers. Oh no, I wasn't going to include them right at the moment. If you want to attract all kinds of people, and you want to be truly representative of all the community and have all the community views, we have to give a signal that all kinds of people are welcome, not only to be on council, but to observe council and come in and have their say. Council has, when we look here, we're probably, a lot of people here are on farms, in business, or retired, and there's probably only that I can see maybe 2 of us on wages, and the other person probably has a little bit more flexibility, but it isn't about me, it's about people who come after me. It's also about people who come to observe and have a say. I know someone who wanted to have a say today, but he works 9 to 5, so he couldn't have a say. That's actually not very democratic. Previously, historically, councils in rural area particularly have been a retired gentlemen's club. And they have very much been retired gentlemen's clubs. Or they have been, business people or farmers who will do things, who will have it on the side. But it hasn't included, right now we have a much more representative council. We've got 5 women, we've got 2 people who are on wages, and that's a great start. But, we should be heading much more towards a much more exclusive council. We voted for it to have it at 1 o'clock so that farmers, the people here who lived far away, could go back, to safely go back to their farms. However, that's at our expense. And I guess I grew up in a rural community where the workers did have to put the needs of the landed gentry before the ordinary workers, and I'm asking that they consider the workers this time, and that perhaps, since I have to give up $200 or $300 a month, maybe the mayor could spend $200 or $300 a month staying in town instead of, he's probably got more money than I have. So what I'm saying is that to make it a more inclusive council, we consider having our meetings back at 6 o'clock in the evening where other people can come and see council proceedings.
Councillor Ryan,
I'm moving an amendment to change the second part. Or I'm speaking against it, but I guess I could be moving an amendment now. I don't know. What do I do next?
well, it depends whether you want to move an amendment to change to
Yes, I
6
do.
o'clock.
Yeah. Or we could have it defer it to a workshop if you want to discuss
So
it.
let's, you have...
No? Okay, I'm happy to amend it.
So you're moving the amendment?
Yeah.
Seconder? Councillor O'Connor? You wish to speak? You've always spoken to it. Councillor O'Connor?
Well, thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm happy to speak to this. I think I support what Councillor O'Brien has said. It is a matter of financial loss for some members of council to have to break their day and take leave. It's also a matter of a lack of proper representation. What I'm really concerned about is that we haven't had an opportunity to discuss some way. This has just come up as yet an extension of a very disputed decision that was made at our first council meeting. It was basically put to council, and there has been no subsequent attempt by the staff or the mayor, might I say, to actually negotiate with other councillors who then opposed this as being creating difficulties for them. I don't know if we want to enforce some sort of hierarchy of inconvenience, but it was put to us that whereas it was put to us that we have two people who drive some distance, and therefore, for their safety, all these meetings should be at 1 o'clock. Well, in summer, if we started at 4:30, I think, or 4 o'clock, that would give a lot more opportunity for more members of the community to attend, and also make it easier for people of all persuasions, not just wages, but business people, primary producers. It's a problem for me. I must say, this 1 o'clock start, I started my day at 4 a.m. this morning to get here on time. So I am concerned that you just haven't considered all the interests of the people around this table or all the people in the community. I'd really appreciate your attention, Mr Mayor, because this does actually relate to your request for consideration of your circumstances, and now I'm asking for consideration of many, many other people's circumstances. For example, we could alternate. Another way that we could address this is to have, during the summer months, a later fixture, so that in winter, when it does get dark early, we could, concede to a daytime meeting. A lot of things have gone by the way with this meeting time at 1 o'clock. A meal has gone by the way for Armidale-Dumaric councillors. In the past, the tradition of Armidale-Dumaric Council was there would be a shared meal between staff and councillors, and that was an opportunity to get to know each other and socialise a little bit and talk about business, catch up, arrange meetings. Another thing that's gone by the board with the merger in respect of councillors has been that we used to have a very small little beverage and a cheese and a biscuit after the evening council meeting. Not everybody stayed, not everybody had to stay, but once again it was a civilised custom, if you like, for Armidale-Dumaric councillors and staff to relax for maybe half an hour after a meeting and have a bit of a chat about what had just happened and what might go forward. Both of those things have been struck out with the merger, and there's so much talk about cultural change, but all that I can see in cultural change so far with this change is that there's now no opportunity, none whatsoever, for socialising or any kind of informal conversation between staff and councillors. It's been a cultural loss, in my view, and that's why I support an amendment that we go back to 6 o'clock meetings, or something that will, or have further discussion to make this fairer and a little bit more convivial as we move forward. Thank you.
Councillor O'Connor, your mic again. Councillor O'Connor. And Councillor O'Connor, we were discussing because there was a motion was 6 o'clock and then you're talking about 4 o'clock, so we're trying to clarify what time. Anyway, a person wishes to speak for the motion, or the amendment, sorry. Anyone who wishes to speak against the amendment? Councillor Martin?
Yeah, it's not actually against the whole amendment. I'm very open to discussing a different time and working at a time that suits everyone a little bit better, but I think setting a time now, obviously this is going to be a bit of an issue and it's going to take some time to sort it out. We would be better to discuss it. That's coming from one of the landed gentry farmers, I might add.
Someone wishes to speak for it? Councillor Robertson?
Well, again, I mean, I'm really supporting Councillor Martin's position that we should have a workshop on this. And and even though now that I've got the mic, I will just simply say that if Councillor O'Brien's amendment is lost, then I will foreshadow another amendment that we have a workshop on it. Thank you.
Another speak against? Councillor Gray, you have the right to reply.
I think it's been very interesting what our co-councillors have put together, and for some of them they're quite reasonable requests. I do believe that we would need to have some level of consistency in the time so that the community knew when, where meetings were. For the sake of time in today's meeting, and as much as I don't want another workshop, I think we need to come to some agreement, and I think the agreement will be somewhere in the middle ground. I definitely think that evening meetings during winter is a safety. There's a big safety issue around that with people having to drive, and that's the community just as much as councillors. I think the answer, in my view, is going to be somewhere in between, and unless we can come to that a decision around that very quickly today, then I would say let's have a time out to finalise this once and for all, because this is the second time now we've been sitting in a council having a discussion around times for a meeting, and there's so many more important things that we really could be getting on with.
Thank you. Now I'll put it to the vote.
I'll actually withdraw mine, because I think what I've changed. I think what they were saying makes sense that we talk about it, and otherwise we're going to spend all, you know.
Sorry, you have an amendment.
I will withdraw my amendment so that we can discuss it further.
You've got the agreement a second, and that is Councillor O'Connor. So do you agree? Oh, the original. No, it's Councillor O'Connor.
Oh, sorry.
Councillor Muriat, do you agree for the amendment to be withdrawn? Okay.
I was the seconder, I think.
No, you weren't. You were the seconder of the amendment, not of the original motion. So we're going back to the original motion.
No, sorry, we've got a foreshadowed
amendment.
Mr Mayor, we have a foreshadowed amendment that the matter be referred to a workshop and then reported back to council.
So do I have that's Councillor Robertson, Councillor O'Connor. Councillor Robertson?
I think we've discussed it enough, so I'll reserve them. I don't think I have a right to reply.
Councillor Robertson? Councillor O'Connor, sorry.
Yeah, I've already spoken. I think that is the best outcome, and the sooner we get to it, the better. Thank you.
Anyone wish to speak to the foreshadowed motion? Which is amendment?
The motion.
So anyone wish to speak against it? So it's a foreshadowed motion that it be amendment that it be put to a workshop. So put it to the vote. Those in favour? 6, 7. Those against? The foreshadowed motion is carried.
So the amendment
That's an amendment.
Now, so Mr Mayor, you now need to put that motion formally that the matter be deferred to a workshop.
Yes. No. So now I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Those against? Carried unanimously. Thank you. I've decided to, all items in number 13, for information, unless there's someone wishes to speak on or raise on any particular item, I'd like to treat them in globo, please. So which item, Councillor Moran? Any other items? So, okay, I'll put it to so those in favour of going in globo for all of the others.
Okay, we haven't had a time to absorb what you're actually trying to do with respect, Mr. Chair.
I said pretty clearly that we're looking at all of item 13. So there's 13.1 to 13.6, I think it is. 7. So then I'll just ask for if there's any that need discussion. Otherwise, I'll be straight put to the vote. Councillor Robertson?
I think we should do them all in seriatim, otherwise we'll be confused. And it's
there is quite a few there that may say we don't need discussion, so I want to put those.
Well, certainly 13.6 needs to be discussed.
Councillor Gray?
Could you please clarify which numbers? 13 point...
So 13.1
yes.
to 13.6.
There's a huge number of items there that need discussion.
So is everyone clear with there's been requests for looking at 13.1 and 13.6?
Point of order, Mr. Mayor, I think there's been a request that the items be dealt with in seriatim, and that's not been resolved as yet.
Yep. All right. Just to clarify, Councillor Robertson, you turn your mic off, please. Just been clarified that we need to have a procedural motion that we bring all of item 13 forward. So could I have a mover for that, please? Councillor Robertson, Councillor Gray. Those in favour? Good. Carried.
Mr. Mayor, what you've got is a motion to adopt items 13.2 to 13.5 and 13.7 in globo.
Yes, that's it.
We'll deal with the other two,
yep.
Unless you want to deal with the in seriatim motion first.
Now, we can deal with 13.2 to 13.5 plus 13.7 in globo.
And I've got a question on 13.5.
All right, we'll deal with 13.1. That's fine. 13.1, which is tenders under the CEO delegation authority as on the things. Can I have a mover, please?
Mr. Mayor, I wish the council to consider 13.1 be deferred until the completion of a council internal audit has taken place.
Yes. Councillor Morat, your microphone.
Mr. Mayor, councillors, sorry, that is not a motion that we can accept. The tenders have already been let. It's an information report, so those tenders have already been let, so we can't, in fact, go back and unlet tenders that have already been let.
Mr. Mayor, they're asking for us to approve things that occurred before the 22nd of November 2017. Council didn't vote to give the CEO delegated authority to approve projects up to $500,000 until then, and there's projects in there that go back to up until the 27th of September or something, I think. So there's questions around whether he had the authority to approve those projects and what his delegated authority was before the 22nd of September.
In that case, I suggest we defer that item to another meeting to get further advice on it.
Mr. Mayor, until the legislation was changed, the limit was 150,000. I received a report. It was permissible to go up to 1 million with delegated authority of the CEO, and on advice I determined that it'd be 500,000, and that's quite legal. That's the state of play. Council determination.
There's a gap. I believe there's a gap between
Council resolution to demonstrate that.
I suggest we defer this, and our CEO will provide clarification. So, defer 13.1. Can I have a move and a second, please? Councillor Witters, Councillor Robertson. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. 13.2. Wait a minute, please. That the cash and investment report be noted. Moved. Councillor Murat and seconded Councillor Bailey. So, Councillor Murat, you speak for it?
No, there's nothing to say, Mr. Mayor. It's a straightforward document.
Councillor Bailey? Anyone who speak? Councillor O'Connor, you wish to speak for it?
I just wanted to make a comment, and that is that I noticed there's close to $1 million that has been removed from reserves, and I'm concerned about that, and hope that that'll be further explored in the budget workshops that are coming thick and furious for councillors at the moment with respect to our budget going forward.
Anyone speak against the motion? Those in favour, put to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? I think it's carried. (13.3) is the quarter water adjustment report. Councillor Murat, Councillor Martin, Councillor Murat, Councillor Martin. Anyone to speak for the motion? Councillor O'Connor.
I just had a query. I would like there to be some explanation as to assessment, the adjustment of $18,000. I think that councillors would probably benefit from having a little more information on that item. I'm happy to accept that at a later date. As we no longer have, questions without notice and questions with notice as an item, I just have to bring them up as we go along, and that is my question.
Thank you, Councillor O'Connor. The information will be provided. So, anyone wish to speak against? I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. 13.4, which is the status of merger funds. Could I have a mover for that, please? Councillor Tiley, Councillor Martin. Councillor Tiley? Councillor Martin? Speaker for? Speaker against?
I've got a question. It states in point A, the Council received a report at its March meeting as to the options of eliminating the $801,803 council deficit. The response under that is that we defer spending on the roundabout until next financial year. We asked that question to try and see what we could do as a responsible council to bring this council's finances back into line. To pick a hold up out of this financial year and drop kick it over the financial year line into the next financial year, as far as I'm concerned, is not a proper response. And we still need to look at reducing council's operating deficit as much as we can, and I'm not happy with the response we received.
Mr. CEO, any comments? No. Councillor O'Connor?
Oh yes, I'd just like to record my support for Councillor Murat's comments and in fact state that that response is not responsive to the question that was put in the previous meeting, and I'd like to reiterate his request for a responsive response.
Noted. Okay, Councillor Robinson, you wish to speak for the motion?
No, I just want to make a comment that as yet we haven't had the report on the Merger Implementation Fund, and I believe from the CEO that it's coming later. But I think that should be acknowledged as part of this discussion. Thank you.
Yep, okay. Then I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? Carried.
Could I have my dissent recorded, please?
Now, item 13.5, Enterprise Risk Management Framework. That the Enterprise Risk Management Framework be reported and noted. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Robinson, you're moving?
I'd like to ask a question, if that's...
Councillor Tiley, Councillor Murat. Councillor Tiley. Councillor Murat. A person wishes to speak for the motion? You wish to speak against the motion?
No, I just want to ask a question. So may I ask the question now? Which was simply that in terms of risk management, I just wondered if the management could consider the potential risks from not meeting national air quality standards and also having the highest child mortality rates in New South Wales. Thank you.
So, Councillor Robinson, you're saying we have the highest child mortality rates?
That is correct. That was produced in a report that was published last week by the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare.
So, no one wishes to speak against the motion? Councillor O'Connor?
I'd just like to add that climate change is a massive risk issue and it's not identified there as in a separate heading, and I think it should be, but that's a comment. It doesn't affect my support for this motion.
I'll put the motion then. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Now, this is in your supplementary agenda, which is 13.6. The rail trail business case. Could I have a move and a second? Councillor Bailey, move. Councillor Gray. Councillor Bailey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. All we're basically doing is trying to provide an opportunity for councillors to be able to make an informed decision. We're not preempting any debate. Too often councillors are accused of shooting from the hip or making decisions that are ill-informed, and all we're trying to do is get some information together to make an informed decision. And it's what was pressured by many people prior to the meeting where we talked about the rail trail. So I would think it's a natural step to make an informed decision, do some research, and then come back to council and make a clear decision on the direction we want to head.
Councillor Gray.
I agree with fellow councillor Bailey in his comments, and to add to that, having a feasibility study done does not say a rail trail will go ahead. It does not say it won't go ahead. It doesn't say, it won't necessarily say that the rail will open or the rail will close. It is a unbiased report so that we can, as councillors, make an educated decision around the pros and cons and the economic viability of either or. So I believe that to make that decision, we do need a feasibility study. We need to have some facts, and although it's a very emotive subject or a topic for the community, the best way to help in the decision-making process is to get some facts at which we can work with to make a educated decision.
Speaker for the motion. Councillor Witters.
I'll word this so it sounds like it's for, but we'll see how we go. So let's start it with, I'm all for a feasibility study or whatever the thing's called, looking at a bike trail, somewhere for the bikes to be able to ride somewhere in this area. So I'm happy for that. I would like to see whether we can maybe change it. If it's called a rail trail, is this feasibility, is this study, whatever, only looking at the one option of using the rail line, or is it looking at all options available on a bike trail? So that's sort of a question. But so I'm all for supporting a thing to look at something that can bring in a good quality bike trail that provides tourism. And I've read that, said that, so I'm good. Thanks.
Anyone wish to speak against? Councillor O'Brien.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, of course we want more information and of course we want to know the best, and I'm not anti-rail trail, but I'm a little bit concerned that the way this has been proceeded has got me a little bit confused. At the last meeting, the motion I supported was the understanding that the investigation into the rail trails was going to be, I mean, I was convinced to vote for it after Councillor Tiley said, let's get on with it, but make sure the investigation doesn't cost the council, the ratepayers, any money, and that we will just do an in-house investigation, ask a few questions. Yes, it's on the record. And so I thought, yep, okay, well, I'll support that. And then I learned that it was put to tender, which was, I don't think the intention certainly was my support of that would go to some sort of tender to an external firm. Furthermore, the whole thing was done in a way that was very difficult for us to investigate, to ask questions, to seek further advice, even to talk to shadow ministers if I needed to see what kind of judgments, decisions could be made around this. So I learned, of the motion in the council meeting. I learned of the tender only last Monday. I learned that there's a tender for the or an expression of interest or some sort of investigation going to be about passenger and rails externally too, and I didn't know about that as well. So it's difficult to make these decisions when they happen at the last minute and so quickly. There's a lot of, we're not even sure, for example, that the Department of the DP&C, their advice has been there isn't overwhelming support, so we could be going along with all this without overwhelming support to start with. So we should be checking that out before we go ahead. I've been receiving lots and lots of community input, experts, enthusiasts, all kinds of people who understand about, how rail trails are built, or who understand, about, passenger train, all kinds of stuff that I would love to be, the councils to be putting in to make this kind of decision as a kind of democratic, inclusive thing as we go, instead of kind of coming in and finding out information at the last minute all the time and finding that the motions that we put forward are not with the understanding that I had when I certainly when I voted for them, and nor was the council given any direction to go and find an external tender or any of that kind of stuff. So I'm a little bit overwhelmed by how it's ended up being a $50,000 external investigation. This is a huge decision for the council. It needs lots of community input. I think we could pool our resources. I mean, we all want to see Armidale go ahead. We all want to see tourism. We all want to see population growth, all those things. I can see wonderful ideas for rail trails too. But I can see also possible opportunities for the much bigger picture, which will really make Armidale grow, is a huge infrastructure projects for the future that could involve rail and could involve passenger or freight. To those who say that we are against, people who are questioning it against, we're not against any of those things, but rushing in, getting investigations before we're sure what people want, before there is overwhelming community support, spending ratepayers' money on these things before we know, I think is a bit hasty. I think there's a lot of questions still to be asked, investigations still to be asked. I don't really like the idea of spending $50,000 on something before we know what the community feel about it. So, yeah, that's my thing.
Your microphone, Councillor O'Brien. So you wish to speak for the motion?
No, I wish to propose an amendment, if that's possible, if we can get a seconder, which is that consideration of the need and the brief for the consultancy is deferred to the budget workshop.
Do I have a seconder for that? Oh, sorry, just to say it again slowly so that... Councillor O'Connor, you turn your...
That consideration of the need and the brief for the consultancy is deferred to the budget workshop, which we're having next week.
You got that?
I second that. And
is there a seconder for that?
Yeah, and I foreshadow an alternative if that is lost.
So, Councillor Robinson.
Yep, yeah. I can speak to my motion now, my amendment.
Yes.
Which is, like Councillor O'Brien, I was under the impression that we were going to do a low-cost desktop evaluation, which would tell us whether the Department of Premier and Cabinet report meant that we would be likely to get any money from the state government. Because if we don't get any money for this project, and it does seem highly likely given the results of that report, because such funding is extremely competitive, then this project is already dead in the water. And I looked at the Rail Trail website, and I certainly don't want to waste ratepayers' money on this if it's not going to go ahead. And I saw lots and lots of competing projects, which would probably be funded ahead of us. I think this is something where we really need to know if we're likely to get any funding before we go ahead. And the two projects that I looked at that look as if they're going to get a lot of funding, one was the Northern Rivers Community Trail, and also the Riverina, the Riverina Highlands Trail, which was the subject of a detailed 2006 feasibility study that indicated great benefit. And in 2009, the federal government provided 220,000 funding for the section. And that rail trail still hasn't gone ahead many, many years later. Another competing project, which I think will be competing for government funds, is the Goulburn to Crookwell Trail, which was funded. It was sought for funding 2014, and there's been several feasibility studies which look as if it's going to go ahead. The councils there are going to put $300,000 a year into maintenance, and the trail itself will cost $15.6 million. But they're still looking for funding. If they can't get funding, given the disputes that we're having in our neighbourhood, I can't imagine the state government is going to want to throw a lot of money at it. So let's do a desktop evaluation, a cheaper evaluation if we possibly can, to save ratepayers' money. Because one of the things we were all elected on was actually looking after the community, and that means using money, resources as wisely as we possibly can.
Councillor O'Connor.
Yes, well, I think I'm speaking as a seconder to that amendment, but I also foreshadow that if it's lost, I have another amendment or foreshadowed amended motion, which would be that Council take no further action in relation to this item. I want to draw attention to the fact that this item actually states, as the recommendation, that Council note the progress report on the development of a business case feasibility study. Now, at the meeting at which this was dealt with as item 3 of 18, I think on the 28th of February 2018, you, Mr Mayor, came in with a particular form of mayoral minute, which of course came with very little notice to us, and you proceeded to amend it from the chair, which was quite acceptable. Unfortunately, what appears to have happened is that the amendment from the chair, which deliberately and specifically removed any reference to council doing a business case or a feasibility study for, and I wish to emphasise the words FOR, the word for, a rail trail. Those were removed, and then if the live screening of our debate is looked at, you'll see that Councillor Tiley in fact said, let's do this as a no cost to council fact-gathering exercise, so that all of us at the time, as I understand it, were of the impression that what was actually passed on the 28th of February by the mayoral minute as amended was simply that. First, there would be some consultation with the state government. At that stage, the DPC report on the consultations with the communities in Tenterfield and also Guyra had not been released. It has now been released. And the result of that report is, as Adam Marshall assured certain people in my presence last Tuesday, people who are concerned about the closure of the rail corridor, which would be a condition precedent to any rail trail going ahead. Adam Marshall, our local member, assured those members, and I believe his words, are truthful, obviously, are that there is no proposal before either the Minister for Transport or the Premier for any kind of a closure of the rail corridor. And as far as his understanding was that the DPC report had basically scotched any urgency, any likelihood of the state government in any time in the near future or any action with respect to granting money or approving a rail trail, because the proponents, who are not this council, the proponents are New England Rail Trail, which is an incorporated body. It's representative of itself, but not the community as we are. The proponent had not come up with the satisfactory items that the New South Wales government required if they were to take this matter further. So that on two counts, there's basically a red light, not a green light, in relation to the rail trail at the moment. The proposal to now, despite the clear words and context of the amended mayoral minute on the 28th of February, which was to not go ahead with a funded business case or feasibility study for the rail trail, that was actually disposed of on the 28th of February. To see it now reappear in our original version of this motion with the incorrect mayoral minute recited in the report, and now to have that corrected so that we've got the correct version of the mayoral minute, which has a raised reference to a business case being done, but nevertheless being used to support the expenditure of some $50,000 seems quite bizarre to me, quite bizarre, and something that we cannot at this point approve. So that's why I'm supporting a motion that we get the opportunity to discuss this in a workshop, because there seems to be some very significant confusion or crossed lines over this. It is just not council's business to go spending money on a third-party proposal that is NERTS. The tourism aspect, this has come up under tourism, and the $50,000 is proposed to be taken from the tourism budget.
Councillor O'Connor, you've had your 5 minutes.
Well, I just wish to finish my sentence then and say that it is not core business. We are in a situation where we are needing to borrow from our reserves.
Councillor
Borrow
O'Connor.
from our reserves over $1 million. We're not in a position to spend this money.
Councillor O'Connor, can you turn your mic off, please? So, is there a speaker for the motion? No, the amendment? A speaker against the amendment? If not, put it to the vote. Those in favour? This is amendment as shown. Those in favour of the amendment? 4. Those against? Which way are you going, Councillor? 4. Yep. So it's 5 against 5, and I'll use my casting vote to not support the motion amendment. So we now have foreshadowed motion. So So we have now a foreshadowed motion from Councillor O'Connor.
The motion is that at this stage, no further action be taken in relation to letting a contract for a business case or feasibility study for the New England Rail Trail.
So kind of your...
And that the matter be addressed. Councillor Tyler is helping me and I'm most appreciative. And that the matter be addressed as an in-house desktop study, full stop. And I would like to say, but not write, that the suggestion of the AEC study be fall with the original motion if this one is successful.
So is that as you wish it, Councillor O'Connor?
Council take no further to letting a contract for a feasibility study or business case for a rail trail or the Guyra Rail Trail and I'll just say at the end of, after the word study, no, that'll do. That's fine. Thank you.
Your mic, please.
Sorry.
Can I have a seconder for that? Councillor O'Brien. So, Councillor O'Connor, you've spoken up for that?
Look, I'll reserve my right of reply, but I think the matters I've just stated are such we're just not in a position to pay $50,000. It was undertaken. The context clearly shows that we were not voting to spend that money, nor were we voting to undertake a promotion, if you like, or a contract that would support any particular proposal, including the rail trail.
Councillor O'Brien?
Yes, I agree. Oh, sorry. I do believe that there was some confusion from our last motion to this one, and I think this was the one that we all thought, well, a lot of us thought we were voting for to start with. So I think we've gone back to what we originally thought was happening at that meeting, and so I'm clearly support us going back to what we believed would be happening on this. So yeah, I support it.
So, Councillor Matt, you got a question?
Just a question, Mr. Mayor. As we're just noting this, and it's giving us the procedure that council staff have followed, and it says we've got 3 quotes as per council's procurement policy, has that tender been accepted under delegated authority, and the horse has already bolted?
So I'll ask the CEO. Councillor Matt, Councillor, Mr. CEO?
If I could just confirm that the small component, the AEC desktop study, has been committed, but no action's been taken to actually confirm the business case. So council can legitimately today make a decision not to proceed.
So, speaker for the motion, speaker against the amendment. Okay, I'll put the amendment as... Oh, sorry, Councillor Bailey, you have the right to reply. If there's amendment, the original mover of the motion has the right to reply. Councillor Bailey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm looking forward, if this amendment gets up at the level of expertise inside the council, to be able to do a desktop study. I'm not sure that we've got anybody inside who could do a desktop study on a rail trail. We have a variety of highly qualified people working in this council, but I don't think we've got anybody who could do a desktop study. That's the first point. Secondly, we can't go to the community and consult because we don't know what we're consulting over. Do we want a rail trail on the railway line? Do we want it beside the railway line? Do we want it from Ben Lomond to Guyra? What are the parameters that we want to consult the workshop on? It was pointed out to me, the whole feeling about what the rail trail was meant and what the opinion was. Well, you know, that was done by a telephone survey of phone numbers. The vast majority of people under about 35 don't have phone numbers. They don't use landlines. They use mobiles. So it could also be argued that it was a warped opinion poll that peer research did out of Coffs Harbour. And I think the other point we need to do is that going to another workshop, we seem to have an approach in this council that everything that gets a bit hard, we go to a workshop. We've been round and round about this. This is a group of people trying to do something worthwhile in their community that they're passionate about. They are business people in this community. My major priority has always been if we grow the business parts of our community, that will increase the prosperity of the community. So I'm very much in favour of it. Let's get some informed information for the study and then let's move forward and see the recommendations come back to council. Then we can make the informed decision to move further forward or not.
Okay, your mic please, Councillor Laley. So I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour of the amendment? For the amendment? 2, 4, 6. Those against? 4. The amendment's been carried. So now I'll put the amendment as the motion. Can I have a vote on that? Those in favour of the amendment? No, the motion, sorry. 2, 3. I've got 3, 4, 5. Those against the amendment was passed and it becomes the motion. So we're voting now on the motion. So those in favour of the motion as the amendment, yes. Those against? The motion's been carried. So moving on to item 13.7, that a report on addressing issues at the University of New England be noted. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Robertson, Councillor Tiley. Councillor Robertson.
Reserve the right of reply.
Councillor Tiley.
Of sorting out the street numbering up there so ambulances can get there in a hell of a hurry, which they can't at the moment because it's so convoluted up there.
Do you speak for the motion?
Yes, I'd really like to speak for the motion and congratulate council staff on taking the initiative to do this. I've had some familiarity with this issue in the previous council, and for those who may not know the full story, this is a really, really critical issue for emergency services of all kinds when the addresses are inadequate. There can be proper phone calls made to 000. The ambulance is out there, but it doesn't know where to go, and people die in that gap. And we are so lucky that this matter came to our notice without a fatality. And I just really hope that councillors appreciate the quality of our staff who have taken the initiative to go forward to the university and get their cooperation in this way. And just as a watching brief, wherever you see a situation where there is an inadequate addressing, please, as councillors or staff, bring this to our attention immediately, because this is a potential death that you can prevent by just bringing this to the attention of council. Or in the case of, I think it was Holmes North, it took me a while, but there was a big, block of housing owned by Holmes North with no apparent address, and that's now been amended and fixed, so that all of those people are now safe. But if there isn't a proper address, they're not, and I just thank the university and our staff for getting together on this.
Councillor O'Connor, Anyone wish to speak against the motion? Okay, I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? Carried unanimously. Moving on to 9.2. This is the endorsement of the draft revenue policy, parts A and B. There's 4 sections in it. Could I have a mover, please? Councillor Robinson.
I'd like a procedural motion that we consider A and B separately from C and D.
So you wish to, and Councillor.
I second.
So moving A and B then, I will put that in seriatim. That's so. So I'll put this, you're moving, Councillor Robertson, you wish to speak for the parts A and B?
No, I wish to speak against parts A and B.
Councillor O'Connor?
I don't wish to speak. I just rely on what Councillor Robinson will say, I hope.
Councillor Tiley?
I foreshadow the 4-part recommendation as a motion.
So you wish that as an amendment?
I'm foreshadowing the motion as printed in the business paper in 4 parts. A, B, C and D. So deal with them all together, that's what I'm saying.
We've only got the motion is only A and B at this point, and the amendment is we do A, B, C and D together.
Yep. Accept that? I accept that as an amendment, if you like. So do I have a seconder for the amendment? Councillor, the amendment would be to treat them all 4 as stated. Councillor Gray. So, Councillor Tiley?
I can't see why we can't deal with them all together. We're only determining today to put this on exhibition.
Councillor Gray?
Nothing to say right now, thanks.
Speaker for? Speaker against?
Well, I want to speak against because I'm not prepared to endorse either revenue policies because there are still serious issues that I believe should be addressed. I'm perfectly happy to have them put on public exhibition, and I think that's really important that we do that. But if we're discussing them all together, then I'll have to vote against it.
That's a prerogative of a free world. Now, anyone wish to speak for it again? If not, I'll put the motion, the amendment to the vote. Those in favour? So this is the amendment that's up there, which is the 4 parts. So those in favour of the 4 parts? It's carried. This now becomes the motion. So I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? Carried.
Opposition recorded, please.
Yes.
I don't even know if you got voted. Yeah.
Now, item 10.1, which is in your supplementary. So, item 10.1, which is a 2-part, this is the Stronger Country Community Fund. So it's in 2 parts. So could I have a mover for that, please?
Again, I don't want to move it. I want to ask a question, which is the Sports Council had a recommendation to spend $95,000 on exercise equipment for the Creeklands. And I'm just wondering where that money is coming from and whether the Stronger Country Communities would also be a useful source of funding for this. And if so, can we please consider it?
Mr. CEO, I might defer this to you. You have the other question?
If I could perhaps ask the Group Leader Organisation Services.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through the CEO, the 95,000, I'd have to take that on notice because I'm not familiar with that. I have seen it, but I'm not familiar where the funding is coming from, but we can get back to you quickly with that. In terms of including it in the Stronger Country Communities Fund list, if they've got an application that's well advanced and they've done the work on it, then there is an opportunity to include it in the list. If they haven't done the work, then we do not have the resources, because we've still got to get 12 applications through, and we've been out to the community, including the Sports Council, to gather and identify all the opportunities, and those 12, we're really pushing hard to get those in on time. Adding another one to it makes it even more difficult.
To move the motion subject to the potential addition of the $95,000 if it is feasible and practical. If I can get a seconder.
So you want to make amendment to the motion as it is? Because that's the only way it can be done.
Yeah. Well,
so do you want to move the...
I want to move the motion plus an additional clause that if practical and feasible, then the $95,000 for the Creeklands exercise station should also be considered.
So I have a seconder for that. Councillor Murad. Oh, sorry. Make sure you get the wording.
Councillor Robinson.
That we, if practical and feasible, the $95,000 funding as described in the Sports Council meeting minutes be also considered as an option for funding under the Stronger Country Communities Fund. That's fine.
So, Councillor Robinson, you...
All I want to say is... All I want to say is this is a great funding opportunity, and I hope we get as much money as we possibly can from this. And I'll reserve my right to reply if there's any other speakers against it.
Councillor Murad. Now, just to clarify to councillors, what's showing up... Oops. So, Councillor Murad? No. Anyone wish to speak for the motion? Against? Councillor O'Connor?
Look, I am going to speak against because I just want to say that I'm pretty disappointed that so many of these projects relate to sport. I think that is... I'm very much in favour of this, of the original, of the number one priority, which is a decent park. So I'll probably... Is it? Well, I'll probably vote against then because in my view, the absolute priority is the park. Much as I have sympathy, we do have a hydrotherapy pool here, but we don't have a decent park for children. My concern, however, is that the process by which this list was shortlisted has been one which has fundamentally excluded councillors other than for us to rank a set of priorities, and I don't think that's adequate. I would like to state my concern that we were not consulted until the list was compiled, and there's many, many, many other needs in this community, and they're not all sporting. And they've missed out because of the process that's been undertaken, and I'm concerned about that, and I hope it doesn't happen again.
Councillor O'Connor, your mic yet again, please. Councillor Talley.
It's not often I'm lost for words, Mr. Mayor. I'll ignore those previous remarks. Look, we were told that there was every chance that we'd get all of these projects. We're adding a small one. Let's give them all the tick and submit them and give it our best shot. Thank you.
Anyone wish to speak against the motion? So I'll put the motion as as it is, the two parts. Two parts with the Dorothy, Councillor Robertson. So those in favour? Those against? Carry. Do you want your vote recorded? Yes. So
we've already had Mr. Woodland say to us that they're stretched beyond belief in terms of getting submissions up, and we're now asking them, with a moment to midnight, to turn around and do another submission for the Sports Council. You know, we're down 2 people in regional and economic development. How can we handle it? Yeah, okay.
Councillor Bailey, your microphone, please.
Sorry.
Okay, I'd like to put that to the vote. Those in favour of that motion, please. Those in favour? Those against? Oh no, carry unanimously. So I'd like someone to move that a D is included in that. And D being that council endorses the following order of merit.
That was intended in my motion, Mr. Mayor. I didn't realise that.
Oh.
Yeah, sorry.
So, Councillor Tully, would you like to move such a motion?
If you recommit the motion, I will move, take out part 1 and prioritise as listed on the screen.
If we just carry a point 30, we'll get the same result.
Yep.
Whichever one.
We'll just wait until we get the text up.
What? With respect, I'm confused because the super playground appears to be number 1 in my papers.
Councillors, this is when you did that survey of the prioritisation of the projects. I think the super playground was listed at the top, but it was not a priority list. It was just simply an information list.
No.
It's in the supplementary agenda.
No, sorry. It's probably driving.
So, with that up, can I have a mover for that, please? Councillor Gray, Councillor Morat. Councillor Gray? All good? Councillor Morat? Anyone wants to speak for? Against?
Just reiterate what I said before. I think the super playground is a standout, and I...
Okay, I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? Councillor O'Connor, your vote recorded. Thank you. So, councillors, 11.1. This relates to the Tas boarding school. Now, I would like that we defer that motion to allow councillors to get a lot more information. Could I have a move and a seconder for that, please? Councillor Gray, Councillor Martin. Do you wish to speak for it, or leave up to it? So I'm moving that. It's been a move that we defer this to gather more information. So if anyone wishes to speak against? Those in favour? Those against? Yes, thank you. Passed. That's it. Can you get deferred? So 11.2, modification to DA 19-2009/A. It's for the deletion of conditions 7 and 47. Could I have a mover, please? Councillor Gray, Councillor Martin. Councillor Gray.
In moving this motion for the deletion of 47 and 47, it's my view that this property originally, it's a private property. Yes, it's being opened for development. If it was being sold as a farm in a whole, it would still remain private property. Therefore, the easement would not be available to the public. And just because it is being subdivided doesn't necessarily change the private property ownership and their rights as private owners of the land. I believe that if public access was to be granted, then council should purchase the land and take responsibility for that land. As far as looking after it, if any incident occurs on that land, whose responsibility would it be if there's public access on private property? At this point in time, the public, as I said before, has not had access to this easement to the creek. There's never been any demand in the past shown to have access to it. Therefore, I don't see that access needs to be gained during this for this development. I feel that there is an opportunity that is being taken in the decision to try and have access to it. Yet there's not a very clear delineation of responsibility around that public access. I believe in the development, when we went to see the development the other day, there is contingencies around having access, whether it's for bike, walking through the subdivision, which I think will more than satisfy those that wish to see that part of our growing city. Finally, I'd like to say that if this is allowed to stay in, if clause 7 and 47 are allowed to stay in, I believe it sets a precedent that council can then demand unnecessary conditions to people that want to develop their land or are actual owners of their land, and as soon as the DA or other changes are put in, then this could be named as a precedent that if this is allowed, then what else is going to be allowed in the future. This is private property, even as a farm or as it is now or as subdivisions, and I think we need to respect the rights of the people that own private property.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you. I just want to say I agree fully with Councillor Gray's comments, and I just think that in fairness to the developers and our town moving forward, that we need to make a decision so that we can move forward. So the removal of the condition means that this will be able to happen.
Someone wishes to speak for the motion? Against the motion? Councillor Robinson.
Yeah, I think the issue here is the public interest, and Section 79C of the Planning Act requires all developments to consider the public interest. And in fact, the report to Council, in fact, admits that the concept of a shared pathway along Dumarick Creek is considered to be a good outcome from a planning and community perspective. This is a route that's close to town, and it's readily accessible to all residents and also readily accessible by the visitor centre. And I think we'd all agree that if it were developed, subject to a couple of constraints, then it could be a wonderful asset to our region, not just now, because obviously it's not going to be developed now, it's going to be maybe 20 years or 30 years or 50 years, but it is something that we should be prepared to look at for future generations, and certainly look at all the possible options, making a decision now. For example, those other issues came up at the site visit. For example, if we didn't go ahead with this particular easement, maybe we could ask the developer to construct the access way, the emergency access way, as an alternative. So I think we need to look at this, look at the plans in detail and see what the best outcome for our community is. And by making a rush decision when there's no need to make a rush decision would be a bad outcome for our community, because there are other options, the options that we could consider just to make sure that the plans are viable. After all, some of the councils here are very, very keen on encouraging rail trails because of the business outcome and the potential tourism. I'm pretty certain, as a cyclist myself, that this would be an even better tourist outcome than a rail trail at Guyra. And I'm pretty certain that per kilometre of trail, that more people will use this trail if it's constructed than would reuse the Guyra rail trail. And I think we also have to remember that making cycling facilities accessible is the best way to get them used, and there are tremendous health benefits from encouraging cycling. A report by the state and the federal governments in 2013 said that the health benefits of cycling are 75 cents for every kilometre cycled. So this could be something that will create tremendous tourism and health benefits. So I would certainly like either to see a workshop on this so we can actually get the plan right. And the idea is not to discourage the developers. We want to make sure that we get something that's usable for all, and if the public have to be excluded until the route is developed in 20 or 30 or 50 years' time, so be it. But let's get it right and let's preserve this route for the future, for the public, because that's what planning is for. Planning is intended to do, preserve important and strategic routes for the future of our community, not just short term, but for the long term, which is many years into the future.
Councillor Tyler, are you speaking for the motion?
No, against.
No. Anyone else wish to speak for it?
Yeah, I will, if no one else wants to. Just having been out to the area on a site visit the other day, as much as I agree with Councillor Robinson's remarks in regards to the health benefits of cycling and everything else that she said, just the area and where the easement is, have concerns on the maintenance and the safety and the location of it, I think, and the accessibility in regards to linking it with the existing bike track that we already have in town. I think if it's possible, council should look to putting a easement on the other side of the creek over there. It's in a easier access to be able to link it to the existing bike path that comes out of Erskine Street, McDonald Drive area, over near there. Can put it in, and I know there's a new sub-development going in on the top side of that hill as well. So it might be a better location for an easement to continue on the great bike path that we have and still have the benefits of getting over into that area to have a look at the beauty of it. And so as much as I agree with you, Councillor Robinson, I think a better location and would be better for that easement, so to take that easement out. So I support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Withers. Councillor O'Reilly?
Let the record show that I support Councillor Robinson very strongly on this issue. Back in 2010, Armidale Demerit Council approved this 70-lot subdivision with these two clauses inserted for very good reason. The developer came to me in December 2016. I too went out and walked the place and then decided that the two conditions should remain. The Local Representation Advisory Committee, which Councillor O'Connell was on, at that time indicated their strong support of my stance. It's absolutely fundamental that public land of this nature is valuable. They're not making any more creek lands, and public access and enjoyment is more important than a developer's desire to overcome the problems he has with the creek fronting two of his large residue lots, 32 and 33. We're talking about two of 70 lots only here. Our strategic planning tells us that the city area has great capacity to expand. We're talking perhaps a population of, in 2050, of double what it is now. There's potential for further development to the east of this 70-lot subdivision. I strongly hold that it's the right of people to stroll, to fish, to picnic, and they shouldn't be impeded in the future from doing this. The issue of intergenerational equity is so important as we inevitably grow as our various strategies predict. An easement, which is provided for in conditions 7 and 47, is a good option. It would provide a shared pathway, and I therefore believe, all things considered, there's very good reason for not waiving these two conditions. Thank you.
Speaker for the motion.
I'd like to ask a question. My question is, do we have a Sydney Harbour here? Do we have riverfront? Are we making any more? Do we intend to make any more? And what is an easement? It's just something on a map.
Councillor Connor, are you asking a question or are you just making a statement?
I would like to be able to speak against this motion.
We'll speak after a speaker for, so
yeah.
If there's no speaker for, yes. Oh, Councillor Bailey, sorry.
I'm amused that we're talking about bike trails again. We seem to be kind of peddling our circle around very quickly. We're in a situation where we have double the green space of any council of our size, double what Tamworth has. This becomes another imposition that we've got to put onto the ratepayers of the city. We've got a budget that is hardly looking rosy, and we're having to borrow from next year's funds to do anything. To propose to add more conditions, more easements, is not what I think is necessary. And I went out and had a look, and I completely understand what the developers are saying there. And I don't think we need to add another easement and another bike trail. As Councillor Witters said, we can add a bike trail on the other side of the river, and that would be fine. But I don't think it's necessary to add it on this side of the river. We've got to begin to try and help and encourage developers, not try and frighten them away all the time. Every time some business proposal comes forward, we want to put conditions on it or oppose it. And I think we're getting into a very dangerous precedent. We're getting back to a situation like the previous council where we're effectively becoming a series of Dr. No's.
Councillor O'Connor, you speak against the motion?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, I'd just like to congratulate Councillor Tiley and Councillor Robinson for thinking of the future, for thinking of future generations and for thinking of the public interest. As some of you might know, I'm originally from Sydney, and I can tell you that in the places where the founding fathers and mothers of Sydney had the foresight to preserve land and things like easements and rights of way around the foreshores, we have the most fabulous amenity in the city of Sydney, for which it's famous over the world. Now, I think that all that the Armidale Demerit Council was trying to do when it imposed these conditions, and I absolutely congratulate the Administrator for taking the advice of LRAC at the time and his own clear and sound thinking that this is a matter of public interest for the future. There are no current costs proposed. This is a matter of an easement. An easement is simply asking the developer to allow that there be a line drawn on the plan of this map that secures a future entitlement to put for a shared pathway across this. There is no question that access to water will be denied or made impracticable or possible. A pipe would see to that. There is no immediate cost to council in relation to managing fencing or managing any safety. There's nothing, it's just an easement. An easement is simply an allowance for a future use. And it may never happen, but on the other hand, it may well be an absolutely vital part of the jigsaw for the future of Armidale's amenity and to allow access to the riparian aspect of our creeklands, because we don't have a Sydney Harbour, we don't have a beautiful broad river, we have Jumaric Creek, and that is our riparian scenic opportunity for the future. And I heard it said recently that compared to Guyra's, our bicycle plan at the moment needs a lot of work. And I think that's the case. And I would be quite happy for this matter to be revisited after we've reviewed and improved the Armidale city's bicycle plan. But at the moment, it's not up to scratch. And I think it would be really terribly sad, not so much for us, but for future generations and their health, as Councillor Robinson puts out, if this is cut off. The proposal the developer has to actually sort of divert cycles through his tight subdivision is, you know, meritorious in the sense that it's an alternative, but it's not much of an alternative, and it certainly would be difficult and probably a nuisance for residents if you had a mass of cyclists. As you know, if the peloton decides to drive all through the middle of that subdivision, let's not see that. Let's see this condition retained, not deleted, these two conditions, so that we can have the future possibility, which was all we're really talking about here, for the public interest to be respected and for people to have access to our waterway and the scenic and amenity aspects of that. I mean, it's just madness after this condition has been thought through twice to now delete it. And I don't think this is any burden on the developer, and I don't think that it is a question of saying, you know, being Dr. No or whatever. This is a question of thinking soundly and sensibly for the future. So please, let's keep these conditions so we can keep an opportunity for us coherent cycling plan in the future that preserves the public interest in the amenity around the creek.
Councillor O'Connor, yet again. Can anyone wish to speak for the motion? Okay, you're right to reply, Councillor Craig.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'd like to also thank fellow councillors for their responses, whether it's been for or against. It's obviously a very passionate debate going on. In reply, at no point has there been public interest shown. This is private land, not public land. So, with all due respect to Councillor Tiley, this land will still be private land. It is not public as yet, and if council wishes it to be public, purchase it. If it's such a small part of a small piece of land, just covering 2 blocks, then look at the option to have access to that and take responsibility of it, full responsibility. There is no mention in the current cycleway plan around extending the cycleway out to the east beyond Tombs Road. There's also a safety and maintenance question that does need to be addressed, particularly in flood. There has, in seeing some of the photos of the flood that has, and with my background in water safety, etc., that raises great concern to have public access in through that area, particularly as there is a large number of drownings which happen in river, creeks and dams. So I think that there is a responsibility, if council wishes to have public access through that area, own it. The developer has put an alternative cycle access, walking or any other type of access through the development. So those that want to do the exercise, yes, I totally believe that exercise, cycling, etc., it has multiple health benefits. I'm not detracting from that at all. There is other opportunities. We have numerous natural, beautiful waterways. We have the Blue Hole, we have the rivers, we have the waterfalls, we have all through our national parks, we have Charleston Willows. To say that we don't have access to our waterways, I'm sorry, that's just doesn't make sense to me. To be able to promote what we have already here would make far more sense than to have access to such a small parcel of land that has been indicated that would not be much for the developer. Well, if it's not much for the developer, it's also not much for council. So with that said, I believe that this motion should be agreed and carried.
Now, before we vote, this is a planning matter, so we will need to get a division, so we need to record the vote. So I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour? So are you getting this? Okay. Councillor Bailey, Councillor Gray, Councillor Martin, Councillor... Councillor Gray, 4. These are all 4s. Councillor Martin, Councillor Murat, Councillor Witters and Councillor Murray. Do you get those? And those against? Councillor O'Brien, Councillor O'Connor, Councillor Robinson and Councillor Tiley. Right, thank you. Moving on to item 11.3, another decision. Council approve the lodging of an application to Crown Lands to acquire lot 7023 at Gyra. So can I have a mover, please? Councillor Murat, Councillor Martin. Councillor Murat? Councillor Martin? Anyone speak for the motion? Against? I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour? Carried. Item 12.1, which is community small grant applications. I didn't see any Gyra ones in there, which is a bit sad. But can I have a mover and a seconder for that, please? Councillor Murat, Councillor Martin. Councillor Murat? Councillor Martin? Anyone wish to speak for the motion? Against? Okay, I'll put that to vote. Those in favour? Carried. What are we up to?
Heading now into some of the procedural, we finished all of the...
Done 13, so request for leave of absence. Who's... No? So nothing in section 15. Section 16. Again, I'd like to treat these... Oh, there's a decision one. So I'd like to treat 16.1, 16.2 and 16.5 in globo, please. Their information. So moved by Councillor Murat, Councillor Gray. Those in... anyone wish to speak? Councillor Murat, wish to speak for it? No. Councillor... Nope. Aaron, speak against?
Well, I don't want to speak against, but I would like to ask a question, which is basically that this is in relation to the Mall Reference Committee. And I noticed that there are some notable omissions from the Mall Reference Committee. In particular, for example, Adriana McLennan, who did the alt proposal, and has done a lot of work looking at the pros and cons of, and is very, very interested in the issues relating to the mall. And also the lady, Maria Hitchcock, who did the 4,000 petition. So I think these people should also be invited to participate in some way in the reference committee. So I'd like to ask why they weren't included.
Councillor Gray, would you like any comment, or do you want me to, as chair of that committee under which this reference group resides?
In a very short response to that is that the submissions that were received by both the people that Councillor Robertson were referring to are, all their information is within the information that the Mall Reference Group will be and has looked at. There was a meeting motion of a group of people, and that motion was agreed and carried. Therefore, the people that are on that reference group are the ones that are on the group.
Councillor O'Connor, you wish to...
I think it's not, I wish to speak against it, but probably not my turn yet.
So, is there no one wishes to speak for? Sorry? Okay, we're putting up those three ones. We've had it moved and seconded.
Yes, we have.
So I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour?
What?
This is just putting those ones at 16.1, 16.2 and 16.5 as to be noted, as described. So those in favour? Those against? Carried. 16.3, which is the minutes of the Armidale Regional Sports Council. It's for a decision, so can I have a move and a seconder, please? Councillor Murat. Seconder? Councillor Gray. Councillor Murat? Sorry, Councillor Murat, you've got to speak.
I said I haven't got anything to say. It's quite self-explanatory what they're proposing, so I'm happy for it to go through as it is.
Councillor Gray?
Same.
Anyone wish to speak for? Excuse me, this is... We're going to deal with what's in front of us. All right. So, anyone wish to speak against this? I think it's up to that. Anyone wish to speak against? Nope.
On.
This is 16.3, which has been moved by Councillor Murat, Councillor Gray.
Yeah. Mr Chair, could I seek leave to leave the meeting? I don't know if I can do that, but Councillor Tiley's already gone.
He's doing us a favour.
I know. I'm not questioning that.
What we'll do is, once this, if you can wait for 16.4, we'll take a break before, and I think that's the last before the closed session, so we'll have a break then. Yeah. Can we put this to the vote? We are just a second. Thank you, Councillor Tiley. So I'll put that to the vote. Councillor Robertson, Councillor O'Connor left the room, so that's those in favour, those against, carried unanimously. So the last one at this stage is 16.4, which is the minutes of the Traffic Advisory Committee. Could I have a mover and a second? Councillor Martin, Councillor Moran. Councillor Martin.
No comment. I think it's self-explanatory. Thanks.
Councillor Moran.
I'd just like to comment that there are a couple of improvements to the parking around the library, which has been causing a few businesses there a little bit of grief, and I would see it's been addressed. That's a good thing.
Anyone else wish to speak for the motion? Against? Okay, I'll put to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? It's carried. Now, there's just any matters of urgent nature? Is there questions on notice? If not, I would like someone to move and second.
Where's that on the agenda? Is that now on the agenda, is it?
So can I have someone to move that we have a recess for 10 minutes? So move Councillor Martin, Councillor Widders. Those in favour? Good, good. So Tim.